Well, good morning if you are in Seattle, Washington. Good afternoon if you are where I am in New York City. Good evening if you are in Brussels, Belgium, or Innsbruck, Austria, or Lagos, Nigeria. Good overnight to people in India, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, all over South Asia. We have many listeners. Australia, Hawaii, Japan, greetings all around the world, and welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. As you know, Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. My guest today is Florian Köfler, who joins me from Brussels, Belgium, but he is an Austrian. He is Director of Artistic Planning and Production at I'm going to say it in French, and you can say it in Flemish, Théâtre de la Monnaie in Brussels, Belgium. How do you say it in Flemish?
In Flemish, it's the Koninklijke Muntschouwburg.
Okay.
I hope I did that right. My colleagues are gonna tell me later.
So, Florian, as you can see, listener, is still a young man, but he's done a lot in his young life. And we're going to go through some of that today. And there's a lot I want to ask him about that he probably is not planning on me asking him about, but this is the first one. Um, your part of the world where you're from, Tyrol, is a place I happen to know incredibly well
Okay, now I'm curious.
because um, I did a lot of my opera training in Italy, and I worked a lot in Salzburg and some in Vienna. But my escape where no one knew me was the Tyrol. And some of it was the Südtirol places like
Mm,
Brixen, Bressanone, Meran, Merano, Bozen, Bolzano, and so forth. But a lot more of it was in and around Innsbruck in Western Austria. And Innsbruck is a beautiful city with an
yes.
incredible cultural life. And some other time I will tell you where specifically I like to go because it is my hideaway. But I have to get to the Innsbruck railway station before I change to go where I go. But talk about, did you grow up in Innsbruck or near Innsbruck? Talk about that part of the world, which is incredibly musical. But I will also say that when you enter a hotel or put on a television, um, and get the Weather Channel or whatever, you don't get beautiful Austrian classical music. You get Tyrolean yodeling music all the time, which is
Yeah, that's
very
true.
hard to relax to for me.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
talk about your upbringing because you've come a long way from there.
That's for sure. So I grew up not in Innsbruck, but about 40 kilometers west. It's a small village called Silz. It's about 2,500 people there. Not much happening really. There's no great opera activity there, and it's mostly what you would imagine it. It's in the middle of the Alps. It's encircled by mountains. There's stunning nature to be had, and also a very open and diverse cultural life, but not particularly in classical music. So I grew up with the local wind band, the Blasmusikkapelle.
Hmm.
Oh, that's kind of the classic way of, getting active musically in that region. There are actually more of these orchestras or the wind bands that are actual villages in Tyrol. It's quite astonishing. Some of them
Yeah.
even have two or three. And it's the way I got into music on the one hand. On the other hand, it was actually my father's influence. He's been in the military for his whole life, more than 40 years, but his real passion when he didn't have to work was actually jazz. So I grew up with jazz at the home, and his saxophone playing is pretty much the first thing I remember from my childhood. And so I was just music was just everywhere. And when it was my turn to also get active musically, I was about 10, if you remember, and at the time I was already quite tall for my age, and my local wind bands, the Musikkapelle Sils, they didn't need any more trumpet players, so they just said, "Well, you're just gonna learn the tuba," and that's how I started. That's how I came
Because
to
you were
my
the tall boy, you got the tuba.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. It makes sense. It does make sense if you think about it. And so I got into music via this way. I really liked it. I had a wonderful teacher who brought me to a lot of different styles of music. I started to actually get interested in classical music. And when I was about 14, 15, that's when it actually made the progression to the, I would say, let's say high school. It's in Austria, it's the gymnasium. I
Hmm.
actually chose to go to the Musikgymnasium, which was specialized in music in Innsbruck. And I started studying at the Conservatoire there, the Landeskonservatorium, and that's how I got my into the classical music fields to the orchestra repertoire. That was kind of the first love. And
Hmm.
then actually pretty much by accident, I stumbled into opera. It hasn't been classic sing hadn't really been something I was drawn to. We had to sing in the choir when we were in the Musikgymnasium, so I had to actually sing in front of people once,
Hmm.
and it was at the time something very unusual and embarrassing. But the teacher who did the choir actually said, "Well, there's actually quite some voice there, and you should do something about it." I absolutely ignored his advice, of course, and then just went on studying tuba with the aim to in the end become an orchestra musician. That was kind of the thing I wanted to do when I was 16, 17.
Hmm.
And there came a day when my teacher, who was the tuba player in the local orchestra, which also plays in the Tiroler Landestheater, which is the local opera house, is a classical, German-speaking Stadttheater where you have opera, you have ballet, or dance, you have theater, whatever you can think of. And
And I will interject, it's a really wonderful theater.
it's a lovely theater, about
By
800
any world
seats.
standard, it's a
Yeah.
wonderful theater.
It's a really nice theater, actually, in the all'italiana, you're in an old style.
Right.
And so there came a day when he said, "Well, I think you're ready. You're gonna take over from me to play a performance in the pit."
Uh-huh.
And he said, "Well, just listen to it, and in 2 weeks you're gonna jump in for me because he had another gig." So I got a ticket for Der Fliegende Holländer, The Flying Dutchman, which was my very first opera. I was 17, and it
That's what's
just
called jumping in at the deep end of the pool.
absolutely, absolutely, and it just struck me. It was the most amazing thing I ever saw.
Yeah.
I just said, "Well, this is it. I'm gonna dedicate myself to this." And at the time, which is talking about throwing yourself in on the deep end, at these houses, usually they run like one or two different operas at a time.
Yeah.
So I wanted more. So I said, I'm just gonna go to Vienna because there they play opera every day. And I went to Vienna on that day and it just saw I'm just gonna go to whatever opera they're playing that night. And for some reason it was Parsifal. I stumbled into Parsifal on the Stehplatz, the standing tickets, really classical for €3 at the time. It was just amazing. And then I, it has been and has ever remained my favorite opera, Parsifal. It's the one I'm gonna take on that, lonely island someplace. And after that, my mind was made up. I wanted to become a singer and stand on stage, and that's what I pursued then. That's how the story unfolded from then on.
Okay. But I want to go back to Tyrol.
Yeah.
Um, when you were growing up there, and what this may sound like a facile question, it's a very serious question. Um, I grew up by the water in New York City, but
Mm.
we're surrounded by water. We have an ocean, we have rivers, we have bridges, and so on. And even though we have tall buildings that could be like the Alps, um, we are aware of water here if we pay attention. And in my life elsewhere in the world, I've lived largely at or near the water. when I have gone to the mountains, which, as I said to you, is my hideaway place, the aesthetic, the sound, the whole sensation, the feeling of the air, everything is entirely different.
Mm.
And in Europe, people I know are either they call themselves sea people or mountain people, and I think you could be both. But when you grew up in a place with these gorgeous mountains and the scenery there is magnificent, but in front of you are mountains. The way the air travels to you, the way you experience weather and temperature and so on, the kind of food that you eat is entirely different from the land. You are now in Brussels, which is a magnificent eating city. It's in the middle of
Absolutely.
the country, but the coast in Belgium, nothing in Belgium is far. And the North Sea in Belgium is a very different experience, but very
Mm.
beautiful, really beautiful. But just Ostend, that area, but very different. Um, what was it like when you left the mountains? I know you went to Vienna, which is a river and so forth, but
Mm.
eventually you came to other kinds of environments. How did you experience the boy, the man that you had become in front of very new elements and different kinds of people and sensations?
I think that's actually a very good question. When I was very young and you kind of grow up in a valley and there's the mountains in front of you, they're in your back, and there's just actually two sides you can go.
Yeah.
And it's just a very, I guess for me, it's a very cozy feeling. It's what I'm used to. Some people find it very oppressive because you kind of you feel trapped. Some people feel trapped, and they prefer the open, vast land here in Belgium or like in the Netherlands where everything is flat. For me at the time, I had this, idée fixe when I was young that if I just can cross this one mountain I'm seeing in front of my house, I'm going to be in China.
Mhm.
It was just so unsurmountable and not when I was like 4 or 5. I thought
Mhm.
this is like it's the other end of the world just behind this mountain, which of course isn't the case,
Yeah.
but it was an idea I had at the time. And
Yeah.
I remember feeling also very strange when I first moved out, which was after I finished my studies in Innsbruck at about age 19, 20, and
Mhm.
went to Vienna. Also, the big city life was something I
Yeah.
had to get used to because I grew up in a very small place. Everybody knows everybody. I'm practically related by blood to almost half of the village. It's just how things are there, and it's for some people it feels like a liberation to actually go out there, see something else, explore the world. I have to say I love returning there. I have so much family there, so much friends. I love to visit. Every time I'm there, like to spend as much time as I can on the mountains hiking. And for me, it's also hideaway. I go there every summer when I'm just at the end of the season. Everybody's tired. You've seen a lot. You just wanna just shut off for 2 weeks. That's where I go.
So one last question before we leave the Tyrol. I began this program, Fred Plotkin on Fridays, in April of 2020. So I've been doing it for a while now. And when I began it, it was during the pandemic,
Mhm.
the worst part of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
And everything was shut. And I was able to get singers who otherwise just don't speak. They want to save their voices. But I
Mhm.
had people like Thomas Hampson, Christine Gerke, Ben Hepner, Julia Bullock, Ferruccio Furlanetto were my first five. I decided after that to not only have singers, but to have other people in music and later people from other professions. And my first non-singer guest was from your part of the world. It's the conductor Manfred Honeck. And he is from Tyrol. I forget exactly where. And he spoke so passionately about that area,
Yeah.
um, with a kind of religious reverence for it that one really wanted to get on the first plane or
Mm.
or dog sled or something and get there because he made it. It's his place where he nourishes and where he goes to
Yeah,
rejuvenate, where he goes to study his music, where he goes to pray, where he goes to be in the mountains and be away from everyone and everything, like some
that's
Mahler song.
that's the perfect thing to actually just hike these mountains. And there are some people around sometimes,
Yeah.
but maybe two or three on the whole day. And sometimes you're just up there all alone, and the silence up there is it's mind bending. It's really amazing.
But is it good to form a very simple question?
I do
That
think so.
mind bending silence and being alone.
Absolutely. I think that music is born out of silence, and that also that willingness to fill all of the imagination. It's so closely linked also to how composers, especially in the past, have worked. You know, the Alpine Symphony by Richard Strauss,
Strauss, yeah.
or just the composer hut that Gustav Mahler had, not in North Tyrol, but in Südtirol, not so far away, which is now Italy.
In
Uh,
Toblach, in
in Toblach,
Dobbiaco.
Dobbiaggio. Yes, exactly there.
Yeah.
That's where he went every summer to compose, and some of
Well,
his
actually, I'm going to
most
correct you
appreciated
just a little
works.
bit.
Yeah,
He had three composer huts,
yeah,
and in his youth, it was in the Salzburger Land near Salzburg. In the period of the fourth, fifth, sixth symphonies, but especially the fourth, he wrote on Wörthersee in Carinthia, and then toward the end of his life, he got the
I was
place
there.
in Toblach, where he wrote Das Lied von der Erde, the eighth, the ninth, whatever we call the 10th, whatever he did of the 10th. Derek Cook edited, but it's so interesting because these places are all so different.
Mm.
And I've been able to spend time in all three, but unfortunately, the one, excuse me, in Italy, they built a zoo behind it. So now,
Okay.
when you go in his quiet composer's hut, you suddenly hear the cry of animals from behind, goats and sheep. It's not as quiet as it was when Mahler was
Wasn't
there.
his idea at the time, I guess.
But
Yeah.
you see, the reason I'm asking, and I agree with you about Richard Strauss and Alpen Symphony, is that my favorite Richard Strauss opera happens to be Elektra, one of my favorite operas of all. And in that one, she screams, a line, God's a line. She's
Hmm.
always alone.
Yeah,
And I'm more like
that's true.
Elektra.
You want to be with people. Yeah, I guess that. Yeah.
No, not all the time, but because you could be alone on the water, but the acoustics are different. To
That's for
me,
sure.
I grew up with the acoustics of water.
Mm,
And I know in the Alps there are lakes and so on, but it's a different sensation, the waves, the constant flow,
mm.
where in the town where I live in Italy, you sometimes cannot hear your telephone because the waves are so loud. And I love
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I really
Mm,
love that because it's a different kind of silence, but it's a
mm.
movement, it's a cadence. And anyway, this is something we could talk about a lot. But now that we've gotten you to Vienna, um, and you began to sing,
Yes.
and you have a bass voice, and are you happy you have a bass voice?
Oh, well, from an industry perspective, I think if you're not a baritone, that's a good thing.
Okay.
If you want to have a job and the more extreme your voice gets, I think the easier it gets. I mean, let's say, the most lucky people are the tenors actually, because
Mm,
everybody's always looking for tenors, no matter what, no matter what fach you're singing. If you're like a
right.
spinto tenor or like a character tenor, whatever. If you're a tenor, you've got a job, pretty much.
Yeah. Well,
And
just the other day I was listening to an old interview because Johnny Cash died in 2003. But in America, we have this wonderful interviewer named Terry Gross. She's really the best.
mm,
And it was a interview that she did with him in 1997. And he was talking about the development of his voice, how for a long time, well into his teens, he had been sort of a high tenor, a very lyrical,
okay.
beautiful tenor. And then one day he woke up or didn't actually not woke up. He described it as in the afternoon he came home and suddenly began to sing and found his voice and dropped down to the deep bass that we knew. And he was talking about the fact that while he liked singing the music that he did as tenor, which was mostly country and western
Mm,
and gospel and religious music, that he felt more connected to the bass voice and what that
mm,
could do. And I
mm.
think part of what I meant with my question was not only the voice itself, but the characters you get to play
Yeah,
as the bass are different from the tenor because the
absolutely.
tenors all die or they get the girl and the girl dies.
Mm,
Um, and they're wonderful roles, the tenor
yeah.
roles. But I have a very strong sympathy and feeling for bass and bass baritone
Mm,
characters and the people who sing them.
absolutely.
There's something in the humanity. I recently was able to have in person in front of an audience here in New York, Renee Papa,
Wow,
who
he's
does not
amazing.
speak very often in front of the public, and I was honored to have him. I can send you
Mm,
that. And he was talking about the morality and the judgment of base characters, some of them immoral,
yes,
but the devil rolls and Don Giovanni perhaps.
but
But
those are the
then,
best.
yeah, but also, I don't know, getting back to Parsifal, when I see Parsifal, to me, I love Amfortas, but I really love Gurnemanz.
Yeah, he's the best actually.
And Gurnemanz, according to Rene Papa, is the person who tells the story. It's the longest
Mm,
role in the opera
yeah.
and very powerful because he's a bit an outsider and the person between the audience and the story.
Mm,
And what I love in the opera Parsifal is the way we see the characters, but at a distance, at a remove, thanks to Gurnemanz.
mm,
We see the struggles of Parsifal and Kundry and of Amfortas especially, but it's Gurnemanz who's the person who takes us into that world,
yeah,
along with Wagner's orchestra.
absolutely.
So, what were some of your favorite bass roles when you were singing bass?
Well, I think I stopped a little too early to actually get to that kind of repertoire. But what I always liked were those more profound roles, not even when talking about the actual pitch, but who just have this strong connection and feeling. I got to sing Arkel in Pillars et Mélisande, which was
Uh,
very interesting. Zarasto has very, very many layers to him,
yeah.
that's for sure. And just these also antagonistic sometimes characters, which are very, very nice. And of course, I think there's no role that's more appreciated by all basses or like a basso cantante, which was kind of my fach, which is Filippo II, Philip II in Don Carlo is, I think, the most nuanced, most astonishing role we have in the repertoire for the bass voice.
As you know, because I think I sent it to you back in August, I had a guest on named Maria Cristina Necula,
Yeah.
who was a specialist in the opera Don Carlo and Don Carlos and the whole story of these characters. And I refer listeners back to that
Mm.
because she really explains beautifully who was Philip, who was Carlos, who was Elizabeth, and the other characters in Verdi's Don Carlos, Don Carlo. Do you have a preference in that opera, whether it's in French or Italian?
Oh, um, I think it's a very autobiographical thing, but the first version I saw was the four-act Modena version,
Yeah.
which unto this day is actually my preferred version. I can relate to the Fontainebleau cinq-act French version absolutely, and it does make a lot of sense. But for some reason, I I just always think of Ella Jemima more, not about the French version. It's just so ingrained in my ear that I'm always going for the Don Carlo.
Tell me the truth. It's because you wanted to get out early to have a Käsekreiner before going to bed.
Actually,
Audience,
not to
that's a
start too
particular
early.
sausage one eats in Vienna outside the opera house
Yeah.
after the performance. um, and then because you're still a young man, you made a rather, I won't say astonishing, but important decision.
Mm,
which increasingly I'm finding singers doing. And which is not to say to go into administration, which is what you did, but where singers are stopping their singing careers
mm,
and doing other careers.
yeah,
Sometimes because their voice no longer serves them, sometimes because the business is hard. In many cases, singers I know, they want to be with their families. They don't want to travel
yeah.
as much. I divide singers into two, those who love to travel and those who hate to travel. And I go back to an era before Zoom and the kind of conversation we're having now, where my friend Marilyn Horn and I, she did not want to use her voice, but she was often up late at night and wanted someone to
Mm,
talk to when she was
yeah.
in Paris and I was in New York. We used the fax machine to write notes back and forth to one another so she would not use her voice. Then Jane Eaglen, the soprano, was one of the first people to do email. And now
Mm,
we're in a different place with that. But many singers are lonely. Many
yeah.
theaters, and perhaps we'll get into this discussion, have
Yeah.
different policies about how singers are compensated for their accommodations, for their meals. Are they paid for rehearsals? Some theaters pay for rehearsals, others do
And
not.
don't. Yeah.
And therefore, if a singer comes to a city and she gets an apartment or a B&B and she pays for her food and she's away from her spouse and children and she gets a cold at the last rehearsal and misses three performances, she has no money.
Yeah.
And it's something of a risk. And there are other kinds of contracts, especially in Europe, where singers are resident in a theater. If they're in Germany or Austria or other places, they have
The
national health
ensembles, yes.
insurance, their children get education, they have an apartment where they can live in and they can have a stable life for their children if they have children. But even if they don't, they're lonely on the road. Then there are others, and I know these people too, who love to travel and can't wait to go to the next town and discover the next city. Um, Joan Sutherland and Richard Bonning used to travel around the world. They'd have their seasons in Sydney and Vancouver
Mm,
and San Francisco and New York and then London. And then they would go back to their home in Switzerland and relax. And he would study music and she would do needlepoint. And then they'd go out on the road again.
yeah.
And they loved the road and they did it for their whole careers. So, long way of saying that you made a change for any number of reasons, but may I ask why you left singing and then studied arts management, which is what you do now?
Well, first off, I didn't even study arts management. That's the truth.
Okay.
I just threw myself in at the deep end, as I tend to do. So here's how the story goes. So I started in Vienna, wanting to be an opera singer. I spent pretty much every night at the standing tickets, in the Vienna Staatsoper. You could see everything because at the time I was pretty much a newbie to opera. I didn't have much experience. I had never seen before La Forza del Destino, which you can just see on a casual Monday with Ferruccio Furlanetto singing Padre Guardiano. So it's a huge privilege. And also with the Volksoper and Theater Navin, you can see pretty much everything that opera has to offer. And I was always interested in that, which I mention it because it's not quite unusual to have singers who say you would not make them go to opera anytime. They would
Hmm.
just say, well, I don't want to go there. So I was always interested. And I had my first jobs when I was 23, 24, pretty early, starting off, then joined the young artist program at Theater Navin at the time and worked also freelance later, then at the opera in Cologne. So I was enjoying a quite considerable career. It was going well. I had lots of stuff to do, some decent roles. I had the privilege of working with very, very, very good conductors, directors, and colleagues on stage. At the same time, for a number of reasons, also which you mentioned, I didn't see myself for the next 30 years pursuing this career, especially because of the lifestyle.
Hmm.
You can go two routes if you're in Europe. You can just say, well, I'm going to take it on a more stable basis and try to get a fast contract at a German house. At the same time, after 5, 6 years, once the administration changes, there's a new general director, most likely you will ask to leave. If you manage to stay in a place for 15 years, you're just going to be prolonged indefinitely. But is this something you want, especially as a young man? I don't think so. Um, and the other thing
Well, it
would be,
depends on the city.
yeah, if
Not
the city is
really.
very nice.
And
Yep.
how you feel connected to a place.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name cities, but let's just talk about Germany. There are German cities I adore and others where I don't adore.
Yeah.
And,
I can relate.
and so, if I'm lucky enough to be working in one of the cities I adore,
Yeah.
terrific. But if it's a city that's a little boring
Mhm.
or closes early because I'm a late night person,
Yep.
or any number of reasons why I don't connect with it, it's not the fault of the city. It's just
Yeah.
that it's a connection.
Yeah. If you don't feel that connection, and you could also say, well, I'm going to go freelance and not be at home for like 8, 9 months per year.
Yeah.
That's also a very considered choice. And I think it's very nice that you actually bring up the huge problem we have in our industry about loneliness. People, especially outsiders, they see, the applause. They see the grandeur when they actually do the performance. And what they don't see is that people just then, change, go out on the street, and they are nobodies again, and nobody knows them. And they spend 2 or 3, sometimes if we do Wagner, even 3 days in their apartment, figuring out what they want to do because they are maybe 6, 7 hours in a plane from their family and their friends. And that's a huge problem. And it's kind of ingrained into the job. When I was very young, actually, at the time, Brigitte Fassbender was the intendant at the Landestheater in Innsbruck. And she would often, talk to young singers, local singers, do master classes and so on. And I remember when she opened with the phrase, if there's something in your life that gives you the same pleasure as singing does, do that. At the time, I thought it was really harsh. The older I get and the more experience I have in this field, I think she's absolutely on the money. And that's kind of the realization I had when I was 29 at the time. It was, let's say, October, November of 2019 is when I made the decision to not prolong my contract in Cologne and just say I'm gonna go move into administration because I also didn't see myself entering a choir because that's also a choice you can make if you say, well, I want to live singing. Well, chances are, if you're in a choir, you actually get to sing until you retire, which for a lighter soprano voice might not be the case. So I made this decision shortly after the turn into 2020, and I actually had it was rough because people were mostly asking, yeah, what's the problem? You're a young guy, you're a bass, so you've got some decent engagements coming. So what's the problem? And I said, well, I I'm interested in opera in a more, let's say, holistic way, also about what it does to us as a society, what it can do for each and every one, and what it really is important about it. And as a singer, you should, if you're wise, mostly just be aware of your own performance, your own voice, and it gets you to a state where you're just very lonely, I guess. And that's kind of the a very, very difficult thing to accept, or it was difficult to accept for me. And I got very lucky because for some reason, the people at the Staatstheater in Karlsruhe in Germany, they were looking for a dramaturg.
Mhm.
And I,
Explain what a dramaturg is. I know, but I want you to tell the audience what that is.
well, that's actually a good thing because I didn't know when I applied for the job. As a singer, at the time I was like, the dramaturgs, they're the guys with the glasses and the turtlenecks, sitting pensively next to the director and then just coming up with something about Adorno and nobody understands what they're really saying. That was kind of the idea I had of a
Adorno,
dramaturg at the
I'm
time.
going to make this very clear because that happens to be one of the operas I know best. Simone Boccanegra
Yeah,
is a very confusing story, but it's really not.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's not. And I find myself defending that opera all the time because I think it's one of Verdi's most beautiful,
That's for sure.
healing operas. It has a terrific bass role, a
Yeah,
terrific baritone
Fiasco.
role, all across the spectrum, soprano and tenor. All the roles are great. And it's, I think, the opera he felt most deeply of his all of his operas.
Mm,
And a lot of people, including critics recently for the New York Times, discount it because they say such a silly story. And this is frankly where you may need a dramaturg to actually explain how meaningful and deeply
mm,
felt this story is, and how, in my view, it's it speaks more about Verdi than any of his other operas, although they all do. But I think this is the one that is most
yeah.
Verdi. So
I think it's kind of the chosen one for all the Verdi lovers who actually know his oeuvre.
yeah,
And it's the same thing with Frau in the Stadt and Strauss. That's the one we all go to because we
not
we love
me.
our Lord, you'll stay with Electra, that's fine. But it's kind of the jam that's
I
maybe
know.
underappreciated because Frau in the Stadt also has let's face it, a very difficult to tell story. And what a dramaturg does, especially in a German house, is it's a kind of in between everyone. You're part of the house, but you're also, discussing with the director about his ideas. That's the core business. You're helping with programming, getting in new people, seeing and scouting, sometimes singers, if it's someone with my background, or directors, if you're more into the scenically leaning side. And you just help out there. You communicate a lot with the audience, which is very nice. I did about, let's say, 60 introductions per season, sometimes 3 or 4 different operas each week. And I just had to stand there without any, notes and give an introduction on Nabucco on a
To the
Thursday
audience,
to the audience. On a Thursday, I did Nabucco. On a Friday, I did Hansel and Gretel. On a Saturday would be
same thing.
die schweigsame Frau.
Wow.
And it happened like 1 or 2 times when I just, I got going and like I was introducing the thing and people started looking at me funny and I realized it's actually not Hansel and Gretel tonight, it's actually Zauberflöte. That can happen. That can happen to you in a German repertoire house. There's
Yeah.
just so much going on. It's 7 new productions we had in Karlsruhe and about, well, let's say about 10 revivals per season. And there's some guys out there who just do a lot more even. And it's just the huge just plethora of repertoire you can see and experience, which was very interesting. And I got the job there for some reason. It was actually very funny because speaking about COVID, I remember having my job interview in February of 2020 when
Ooh,
everybody said, well, everybody's just hyperventilating now. This is nothing serious. It's going to be over. It's like the bird flu or something. It was really different. We all know
yeah.
now, but at the time we were just ignorant. And I actually was lucky enough, like in so many ways in my life, to land the job just before they closed down everything. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have hired me 3 months later. I'm not sure.
I just want to interject one thing, a true story that happened about, I don't know, a couple of months ago in August to me. Um, I was working with someone, a younger person who wanted to go from being a singer to becoming a coach.
Mhm.
And I asked her what you're working on now. She said, well, I'm coaching someone for the opera Die Schweigsame Frau,
Wow.
which is a silent woman. And I said, so there's not much coaching there because she's silent.
She actually does sing a lot,
I
actually.
know.
So
But I couldn't resist.
yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so you said to me you didn't study arts management at all, but you did the Opera Europa course. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
So how I got into it is that I just when I started to get interested in arts management, I would just read, listen to pretty much everything I got my hands on about budgeting, scheduling. The one thing I knew was singers and the repertoire because of all the nights I spent in Wiener Staatsoper back in the day. And I lived in Vienna almost 10 years, so I saw a lot. And this is how I got the job. I told them, I have a shoebox which is filled to the brim with tickets from Wiener Staatsoper. I know the repertoire. Just trust me on this. And they kind of gave me the job, which is also connected to someone who I owe incredible amounts of praise for. It's Nicole Braunger, who actually herself is a former singer.
Mm-hmm.
And then she made the switch um, working for an agency and then became Operndirektorin in Karlsruhe. And she was the one, we didn't know each other at the time, but she just said, well, let's just try him. He's got a big mouth. He can talk to people. He's seen some stuff. Let's give him a chance. And that's how I ended up in Karlsruhe. And the funny thing is, as I said, when I was on the job on the first day, I had to figure out with my predecessor what it is that I actually do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I had to now retroactively fill in all the gaps, which I did in a high speed because it's how you learn. And the good thing was when I started in Karlsruhe, which was at the beginning of the season 2021, we did one premiere, did a second performance, and then we shut down again. So it was the second lockdown, we all remember, and nothing worked. So we had to build everything from scratch. So I actually had the chance to be there and see, well, what are we going to do with all these, restrictions with the distance we had, like 6 meters from singers, if I remember correctly, it was
Yeah.
just unfeasible. And we had to see from scratch and, plan pretty much day by day, which we don't do in opera,
Mm-hmm.
and see what is even possible. And there was also, coming in a time of crisis, you just learn so much, especially if it's not working. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to actually go into that. And then I, as you mentioned, did the opera management course at Opera Europa. I did some more training from the Deutsche Bühnenverein in Munich, in management, in scheduling, in budgeting. It's not the most fancy thing to talk about. It's not the most elegant
But it's
thing.
essential.
It's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
People always ask me, "What do you do?" There's like two versions to it. People say, I could say, well, I'm helping in bringing opera to life, the artistic vision of the house, dealing with all the artists. Well, pretty much 80% of the time, I'm fighting about money with agents
Yeah.
and worrying about scheduling and if you have enough time and everybody's available. That's like the really bare bones reality behind it, and I still love it. So I have to say, retrospectively, it was maybe the best decision I've ever made because right when I came into management, into the administration, I just felt at home. It was just a fish in the water.
Explain to listeners who may not know, because we have a worldwide audience, the difference between a theater that's a repertory house or theater and a stagione house. Because when you work, as I have mostly, in a repertory house,
Mm.
the requirements and the challenges are very different from the
Yeah,
stagione type.
yeah. So I'm gonna use La Monnaie de Munt as a good example because it's the best example. The house itself is incredibly old. It dates back to 700 exactly. It's even older than the state of Belgium, and there's the whole story about revolution starting at La Monnaie de Munt in 1830, and
La Jolie, what was the name of the opera?
it's not La Jolie Fille de Perth. It's sorry,
I know.
La Mouette de Portici
La Muette de Portici, that's right.
by Aubert, and when he
There was a
says
revolution there, yeah.
aux armes, allarmi.
Right.
people would take that literally and just take up the arms. And that's
Yeah.
how Belgium started. And that also explains the very, very wonderful place it has in the hearts of very, very many Belgians.
Yeah.
And this has pretty much remained the same. It seems it's in the same place. It's not the same building, but the building we are in at the moment, which I'm in at the moment, it dates back to the middle of the 19th century. So it's about, let's say, 150 years or even more. And there's no wing space.
Mhm.
So we built something.
Wing space explain that. I know it is, but
Yeah. So you
uh,
have this, what you see is what you get. On the scene, you can
the
see
proscenium.
the whole
The
proscenium,
proscenium.
you can see where all the action happens. And in a, let's say, more modern envisioned opera house that was built later, you have a lot of backstage space you don't see as an audience, but you can use it to store even a full set, and you can just bring it in even automatically sometimes, and it's a so-called cross stage where you have like it's like a cross. You see you're the audience here, you see the stage, and there's one cross here and one cross here, and you can just bring it up from below, from above. There are many, many ways. And La Monnaie was envisioned at the time where the stage was, or the sets were basically some paints that just came down, like, the papier
There were
peints.
drops.
Yeah, the wood drops. It would just drop. So it was
Yeah.
very, very
Hanging
ba
from battens above, and they would be lowered, and they
exactly.
would be paintings of a bull ring
Yes.
in Spain, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of the style they
Yeah.
had back in the day. And the house itself, its shape, it has been renovated, it has been adapted, but the space itself didn't change. So if you were to just, go off stage as a singer and go further for like, say, let's say 10 meters, you're basically standing on the street.
Yeah.
And that, of course, makes it that we don't have a lot of time and space to change over very quickly. So how we function is that we rehearse one piece and we play one piece on stage. We take a few days to build it up, and then the whole decor, the sets, they are just standing there. There are there's a little movement in between acts sometimes, but it all has to be stored in this place. And so that makes it so we only have like one opera on at all times. In between,
That
we
is
may
a
do a recital.
stagione, seasonal house. Yeah.
Yes. And it's pretty much the system that is used pretty much all over the world, except for the German system, where it's mostly repertoire. That says that you actually have multiple operas circulating. Um, it's the whole time, which is what I described when I said, well, it's Wednesday it's one opera, Thursday it's another opera, Friday maybe it's a ballet, on Saturday it's Rosenkavalier. It's another thing every evening, and that's it has its merits, it has its advantages, but also a lot of downsides because you don't have ample time to rehearse on stage actually because it's always in use, and you have to change over in about 3 hours. That's kind of the mark you need to hit to be actually able to build down one set and build up another set in about 3 hours, which is just incredibly demanding technically to make work, but which allows German repertoire houses to have like 3 or 4 different opera performances per week.
I'm going to interject something for our listeners that I know you know. Um, Two examples I always give of this story are the old Metropolitan Opera House and the new
Yeah.
Metropolitan Opera House, and the old Opera Bastille and the new, I'm sorry, the old Opera Garnier in Paris and the new Opera Bastille that opened in 1989. The old Met was built in 1883 and was closed in 1966. It was on 7th Avenue, and when you opened the rear wall, you were on 7th Avenue. And if it
Yeah.
was raining and the scenery would get wet and you were doing Parsifal, and then suddenly, the scene in Parsifal at the end is all wet.
Yeah.
Or you would have drops that would come down and hang there and be painted. The old Met was known as the singer's house. They brought in the
Mm,
greatest singers in the world,
yeah.
in part because scenically it was never everything one would want. It was not built for that. The new Met, and I'm sorry they destroyed the old Met, but the new Met is one of the first successful theaters that does
Yeah.
what you call the cross model.
Mm,
And the reason for that is that they began planning it around 1959, 1960. Unfortunately, because of World War II, many opera houses in Germany, Austria, and elsewhere in Europe, Italy, were damaged or destroyed. And they
mm,
began to rebuild the theaters. And new technology was created mostly in Germany for these new theaters. So that's why they have the repertory system in a lot of German speaking houses. But the Met, which had a bigger budget, more physical space, was able to learn from the mistakes and the successes in the German speaking world to build this theater that has wonderful stage elevators that roll back and forth, hydraulic lifts that come up and down. So the Met does in the new house a lot of magical scene changes. The old Paris Opera, the Garnier, is gorgeous,
mm,
beautiful, but not necessarily practical for certain
yeah.
kinds of stagecraft. So it got what I was a student in Paris in the 70s, and the opera that they were most doing was called Relâche. And I didn't speak enough French then to know that Relâche meant relax or closed because they were not doing anything. So
Yeah.
the goal, like New York, came to be to build another more modern opera house. But the French, thank God, did not destroy their old opera house.
Mm,
And so they do ballet, they do Mozart operas at the Garnier, and they do bigger works at the Bastille.
Bastille. Mm,
I was hired as a consultant on the design of the stage for the Bastille, in part because I came from the Metropolitan Opera.
mm,
Um, and it's a wonderful, I think, frankly, it works a little better than the Met stage because they learn from the Met.
yeah.
And because every new theater, if they're smart, learns from the successes and mistakes of the older theaters. The main mistake that the Met made that they would fix now is some of the entryways are not high enough. So they had to build scenery that was on a hinge and folded to get the scenery in and then up again. So in Paris, all the entryways are much bigger, so the scenery can just be rolled out without having to
Mm,
fold it and attach it. Um, the seating area, I would say, at the Met is better than the Bastille because they wanted to sort of have a more quote popular sense,
mm,
but and the acoustics are better at the Met. But the stage in the new Paris Opera is magnificent. So other theaters, for example, Genoa in Italy, had been badly damaged in World War II, and
mm,
they didn't rebuild it for a while. But in 1992, for the reopening of the Christopher Columbus 500th anniversary, they completely expanded and rebuilt in the existing space. And the stage in Genoa is one of the best in the world.
yeah.
And they share productions with bigger theaters like Paris and New York, in part because they rebuilt it that way.
Mm,
So that's
yeah.
the digression that we are making because part of this program is for people around the world to learn about opera. Now, um, were you hired by Christina Scappelman?
Yes.
So
I don't know.
Christina,
He was in
yeah,
the program.
Christina is a longtime friend and colleague of mine. She was on this show my first season, I think. She's worked in Washington where I met her, Seattle, Barcelona,
Oman.
Oman or Dubai. I forget which place in the Middle East,
Oman
um,
it was, yeah.
elsewhere in Europe, and is an outstanding manager of opera companies
Yes.
from whom you can learn and grow with. And she's a wonderful manager. I think the world of her, and she knows that, but you can tell her anyway. Um, what's it like working with someone who is really, I'm assuming you agree, that good?
Yes. That's actually really funny. Um, at the time when we got in touch for the first time, we were kind of It's a arranged marriage, I would say, because it was clear that my predecessor, she would go to Hamburg, where she is now. So the post was just vacant. And something that Christina's really emphasizing is that she comes in to work with the people who are already there. So she doesn't want to do it the German way of doing tabula rasa and bringing her own people in. She just wanted like a continuity in it. I remember that an agent we both know got us together and said, "Well, I think you two should actually have a conversation." And I was in Korea at the time via Zoom at a ungodly hour. I don't really remember. She was in X, and we had a first discussion. And I was really nervous, and we just had a very nice talk. And she said, "Well, why don't we have another talk in a week?" This was in July of 2023.
Mhm.
And we would have these chats talking about pretty much everything that opera entails for sometimes like 3 or 4 hours, getting to know each other, exchanging ideas, and to see if it clicks or not. And then after, I think 2 months or something, she said, "Well, I think we're gonna do this together." And to this day, it's just crazy for me to think that she would actually listen to what I have to say. Me being a generation younger with a very, very different background. She's been long in opera than I am alive. So she has seen it all. And it's just amazing to work with her every day because, and all people know in the business, because there's no one in Europe or in the US who has never been in touch with Christina at some point, who has never heard of Christina Scheppermann. Um, and I think what makes her so beloved also with colleagues is her openness. She's so immensely curious. She would just, drop. She's not at all about her ego. She just cares about making the best out of it. And she's just a very, very good manager on top of being
Yeah.
this visionary on artistic level. She really wants to also dig into the deep details if it's necessary. There's nothing that happens in this house which isn't important to her if it's necessary for the house. And this is something I learn every day from her because she just tackles everything. If there's a problem, you can talk to Christina about it. You can just walk into her office and say, "I've got the following problem. What am I going to do about this?" And she's never going to say, "Well, that's not of my concern." That's a sentence you will never hear from her. And I'm learning every day from her. We kind of, she was still in Seattle. I was still in Karlsruhe at the time. Um, we started with the programming, with the casting, getting everything in line before we actually, because now is the first season where she actually is artistically in charge. And I was very lucky to actually come to Brussels more than a year ago, still working with Peter de Calloway, the old intendant, general director, um, who had been here for 18 years and who has a very also different approach. And he's also an industry legend. And I'm just a very unfortunate man. I just get lucky. I
Yeah.
don't know why. Um, but it's been a real blast with Christina. We're it's pretty much 2 years now, or more than
Mhm.
2 years that we work with each other. And she didn't fire me yet, so I'm actually quite positive for the future.
So when you and Christina and perhaps others on your team do casting,
Yeah,
um, let me phrase it another way. When you do programming,
yeah.
you first think of the singers you might want to have or have available. You first think of the operas you want to do and then find the singers. What's the thought process?
It's both. And it really depends. When we envision something that's really dependent on the right voices, and just to name one thing, because when I was younger, I couldn't really connect to some of the bel canto repertoire because I thought, well, these stories aren't too interesting. Also, musically, it's not happening too much in the orchestra. I mean, I came from, I know, because I was kind of raised on Wagner and Strauss, where
Yeah.
the most ridiculous things happening in the orchestra and the instrumentation and everything. And bel canto just, it's all about the voice. So if we would do a bel canto title and we see, well, we don't really find the voices that justify doing this, we're not going to do it. At the other hand, that's like one approach. The other approach is also to say, there's something that has been missing, some flavor. Uh, the first thing we talked about, and it's actually the first thing Christina wanted to program for La Monnaie. When we got together, I made this list of, what has run in La Monnaie for the last, let's say, 100 years. And you can actually look it up. There's a whole database about this, which I used to make this little study of mine. And we actually realized, well, Benvenuto Cellini, Berlioz's first opera, Opera Comique, has never been done at La Monnaie, at a French, partly French-speaking opera house. And we said, well, that's the one. And that's also an approach to say, well, what's the flavor that's missing in our programmation? Because Christina is really about having this huge diversity in programming, having something for everyone, because it's not about us. And that's something we really connected on, because I can also say, well, if it was up to me, and if we talk about the pieces I've chosen for my little playlist, it's very much based. It's very Strauss and Wagner and Hindemith, but in the end, it's not about me and what I like. It's about what is appreciated by the audience, and our audience is so diverse, we can't even know what they like. So the only approach I can see is to say, when it comes to programmation, to just have something from everything at a very high level, and then say, well, if you're not into, the world premiere with a very provocative stage director, maybe you're gonna appreciate let's say, a little bit more traditional um, bel canto repertoire if you're into that, because we have everything. And that's kind of what we're going for in the programming, to have this huge array, to have also at least one contemporary opera per season, and with a very special twist. One year we would have a new commission, a totally new opera, like this year we will have with Medusa by Ian Bell. And in the following season, I'm not going to name any names because it's still a secret, but we are going to have a European premiere, like to be the second one to do it. Because
Mhm.
if we don't do that, they don't stand a chance.
True.
Of course, it's always nice to say, well, I commissioned this piece. But it doesn't really serve the industry or the public. If no one would just have had done La Traviata again, it would have gone to the
Oblivion.
bin, into
Yeah.
oblivion, and just into the bin, and nobody did it again. So this is kind of an idea to say, well, I think this is a really nice contemporary opera, and the one we're talking about has only been done like 3 years ago for the first time, has never been done again, and will be done for the first time in Europe. And that's kind of the approach we're going for the contemporary repertoire we're presenting.
I'm just going to underline that more for our audience, and then I have a question for you about Benvenuto Cellini. Um, when an opera house or a private organization commissions an opera or a new
Mhm.
work, they put a lot of resources into presenting it.
Yes.
Sometimes these are co-commissions with other theaters to share the costs, but one theater gets the premiere and the other theater gets the second performance. But many wonderful works of art that are commissioned don't get second performances simply
Yeah.
because there's no one out to advocate for it. And there are even a couple of foundations here in America that support second productions of works
Yeah.
with the idea that you want to keep these things going.
Mm.
There was an opera that I'm forgetting the name where I would mention it, that was done here in New York and then was done in Salzburg.
Yeah.
So that was a second commission, but it was not done in the festival. It was done in I think it's called the Landestheater next to the Puppet Theater
Yes.
near Mozart's house. Um, Now, Benvenuto Cellini, people who know me know that I'm a huge Berliosian. You either are or you're not.
Yeah,
And I'm a
it's true.
huge Berliosian. And back in May, or no, April 25th, I had Susan Graham on, and she's one of the greatest Berlioz singers, greatest singers. And people can go to YouTube or Adagio and enter Fred Plotkin, Susan Graham. We spent our time mostly talking about Hector Berlioz and how magnificent he is. So I
Yeah.
know Benvenuto Cellini. I love that opera. And being an Italianist, I know the whole story of the sculpture, and it stands in
Mm,
Florence in the Piazza della Signoria and how he created that sculpture. The music is glorious. It's a wonderful opera,
yeah.
but you really need a tenor, a
Yeah.
so-called voix mixte, a mixed voice. Um, so that's an example of, yes, you can do that opera, but you kind of have to know who your tenor will be before you schedule the opera, right?
Yeah. And we have John Osborne, so
Great. Yeah.
we're doing well.
Great.
Exactly. It's exactly what you're saying. Some operas just come with very, very difficult parts. If you don't have the right people for it, it's not really worth doing. And
Mhm.
that has been our approach. And right from the get-go, we were like, yeah, if we want to do this, we're going to do this with John, and he's going to join us for it. He has done it already, and he's a very good shape vocally, I have to say. And
He's an American from Iowa
yeah,
who unfortunately does not sing much in his own country, but
that's
is
true.
hugely in demand in Europe. The last time I heard him was in Amsterdam, actually,
Yeah,
in Rossini. And
maybe that's also maybe connected because we in Europe we can actually afford to go into his repertoire, which is maybe some of the more unusual stuff like Guillaume Tell or
yeah,
something like this, which in the US is maybe not even done because it's too risky. People wouldn't like to see it. It's very
well,
difficult to
Guillaume Tell,
produce.
absolutely, we love, and the
Yeah.
Met did a
Oh
production.
well.
Yeah, but he was not in it. I mean,
Yeah.
we had wonderful tenors. I'm not complaining. We had
Yeah.
wonderful singers in that production, and wonderful Gerald Finley was
Mm, yeah.
Tell, and he was fantastic. But Um, no, and Claudio, sorry, not Claudio. Oh, I'm suddenly forgetting his name. The wonderful conductor from Genoa, Fabio Luisi. Fabio
Fabio
Luisi
Luisi, yes.
conducted. It was a wonderful performance. So we do it, but not very often.
Mm,
But in constructing your season, I guess that my next question is, you were talking about the diversity of the audience.
mm,
Brussels, arguably, maybe even more than London, Berlin, Paris,
yeah,
is the most diverse city in Europe.
it is.
Simply because you have the offices of the European Union there, so you have people from all countries. It's trilingual,
Mm,
Flemish, French, and English. Everyone I know there speaks English.
yeah,
Um, the food is fantastic, but it represents different cultures.
yeah,
Um, the if you go south, it's more French speaking. If you go north, it's more Flemish speaking.
yes.
There is the wonderful Flemish opera in Antwerp and Ghent,
Mm.
where when I've gone to performances there, people sit and eat chocolate during the entire Belgian chocolates. Um, but Brussels is a thing unto itself. It's
Yeah.
not. By the way, one more thing about Brussels. It has one of the best museums of musical instruments in the world.
That one's amazing. It's an absolute must see. If you ever make it to Brussels,
Fantastic, fantastic
yeah.
museum.
Mm,
St. Petersburg has a museum like that, but I think the one in Brussels is even
mm,
better
yeah.
and
And
more accessible.
you you actually saying a very, very good thing. I think if I'm correct, Brussels only comes second when it comes to the most nationalities present in a city after Dubai. There's more
What
than
about New
100,
York? New York
maybe as
is
well.
the most, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 160 different nations and
Yeah.
languages and
Yeah.
everything. It's a huge melting pot. Uh, because of NATO, because of the European Commission as well. And in itself, just it has a huge history of welcoming people, and that makes it so special. Also, our audience, it's very diverse. They're very open. I've never had this because, back when I was in Karlsruhe, if we had something that was a little bit of the beaten track,
Hmm.
we were already worried about, oh my God, are we able to fill the hall as well, even with something that we maybe see as part of the repertoire, like let's say, a Salome. Um, it sometimes was difficult. Here,
Filling a hole for Salome?
yeah, in Karlsruhe it was
Really?
difficult. Yeah, I mean, it was also like post-COVID and people had to
Okay.
actually get back again. But it wasn't a fixed starter like Aida or Carmen or one of the ABCs. We also used a lot here in
ABC, Aida, Bohème, Carmen.
yes,
And
exactly.
then we have TTT, Tosca, Traviata, and Trovatore.
That's a good one.
Come next. Yeah, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Those also kind of it's actually it's the hall is filled if you do them.
Mhm.
And here you can actually take a lot of risk because people are just used to La Monnaie having this cutting edge vision, and it's just ingrained into this house, and it has been for decades, and it has just been there for so long. And I really like the city. I've really grown to love it. It's a wonderful country. Just a few weeks ago, I saw a YouTube video where they ask random people on the street where they're from, and they usually pose 5 questions. The first question was to this young woman, name one thing your country is supposed to be really good at. She said, making compromises. And I said, well, she's Belgian. Because Belgium is really is the the country of compromise. It's the French speaking people, it's the Flemish speaking people. The lingua franca, if you want to call it like that, is pretty much English. There's also actually the third official language of Belgium is German,
Yeah.
because there's a small minority close to the German border. That's also very important. And everything we do, and that's a special thing, we have our colleagues in Antwerpen on the Vlaams Opera, which you mentioned. We also have our colleagues in the French-speaking part in Liège.
Hmm.
Um, so it's Flemish, it's French, and we're kind of in between. We have to be everything. And that's very funny because people get kind of confused by the fact that when we have our operas, of course, we have like two different surtitles, one in Flemish, one in French, and during the intermission they change to make it like as equal as you can be. So that's
Are they the same color or different colors?
they're the same color, but they're
Okay.
separated, and so you can actually profit as well as you can, no matter which um, language you speak. And in the future, we will also add English because it's just a reality of this highly
Yeah.
diverse city that for many people, it's at least their second language, and it's the way we communicate with everybody. Also, kind of in the house sometimes. There's a lot of English spoken next to French and Flemish.
Here is a question I've never asked any arts administrator in any theater because Brussels is very particular.
Mm.
Um, do you have, well, there are two questions. Let me start with the first one. Is in a city, Brussels is like Washington, like certain other cities that are not big and they're very administrative. Um,
Yeah,
they don't have a fixed population because people come and go. There are
yeah,
the
that's true.
native people and the resident people. But I have one of my dearest friends is from Hamburg, but he worked for a while in Brussels, and he worked in Canada. His job required him to travel a lot, and now he's back home, retired in Hamburg. But he noticed that he couldn't make friendships, particularly in Brussels, because people came and went. But the question was, is there a subscription base in your theater if people come and go so much, or do you do more single ticket sales than maybe other theaters?
We have a strong abonnement, actually, a strong subscription, which almost fills the hall entirely sometimes. Actually, the problem, which is, I know it's actually a gift we're facing at the moment, is that we usually fill the whole 98%. So we're pretty much sold out every time. So we just keep adding performances as much as we can to actually let people who want to buy a single ticket have a
Mhm.
chance to actually buy a single ticket. The abonnement is huge here in Brussels. It lets us take enormous risks artistically. Uh, there's no real need. It's just a balance thing. You wouldn't need to do all of the most popular titles. You do them because you would like to do them in a very special way because it's La Monnaie de Munt,
Mhm.
but with a very special twist on it. But people just they just come here, which is also something that's just new to me.
Yeah.
They're
How many seats
so
in the theater?
we have 1,150 seats,
Hmm.
which is for European standards, like in the middle of the pack, I would say.
Yeah,
And
Zurich is like that. Yeah.
yes, yes. So it's intimate,
Hmm.
and at the same time, we just finished a ring production, so we can also go deep into the post-romantic repertoire with the huge orchestra. Um, at the same time, do a Handel opera, and it doesn't feel strange. So you can really do pretty much the whole repertoire from the beginning to the contemporary, grasping out to all different styles.
When I worked at the Met in the 80s mostly, and then sometimes later, the Met has 3,786 feet. So it's large. It's a wonderful
Yeah,
acoustic and great sightlines, but it's a large theater. New
yeah.
York is a very large city, and we used to have a lot of people coming here
Mm.
to attend opera because we are a repertory house. Um, but we had a subscription base of approximately 70%, which meant that the other seats could be sold on single ticket sales to visitors, to New Yorkers trying out opera. And every year we had 4 or 5 performances that were called non-sub,
Yeah.
non-subscription, where we'd sell the house, or we would try to sell the house out from zero, no sold
Mm.
seats. And that would
Mm.
be the Zeffirelli Bohème, Traviata, the
Yeah.
popular ones for people who could not get into the Met otherwise. Does the Monnaie ever do a non-sub performance from zero, so to speak, of say, a popular title, or maybe something like Benvenuto Cellini that people want to discover and can't get into?
We try to balance it at every angle. So like some seats, we also do special, afternoon performances for a younger public. We open up our house to also people who usually don't come to the opera very, very often and try to get them in again because we're very aware that the subscription base we have, like everybody else, it's mostly people who are a little older, who are very well educated, like on the basis of people. But if you go outside in Brussels, you can see a wide array of people coming from all over the world, and bringing them into the opera house is, I think, it's the greatest challenge we're facing at the moment to, rejuvenate the audience, which we have our under 30 opera nights, which are just incredibly popular. We hold back tickets for them because they tend to not say, well, 3 months, 4 months in advance when they're going to show
Yeah.
up. That's a little bit of a problem as well, especially with the Ring, which we did like 8 or 9 performances of every Ring part, and they were all absolutely sold out. They loved it,
Eight
and
cycles?
no, no, not the whole cycle. We would like do
Oh, I see.
No, no, no. We did Rheingold 8 times, Valkyrie 8 times, something like that. Because we present
um,
them, we
yeah,
couldn't do a ring cycle because of technical reasons. We
yeah,
had to do them in the order like Rheingold,
yeah.
Valkyrie, Siegfried, and the Götterdämmerung.
Understood. Now, listeners know that I always often ask my guests to go into the Adagio catalog and pick out things that they like, and we post this so that you listener can go and hear what our guest loves. And I'm just going to read yours because they're very straightforward. They're wonderful, and they refer to things you've spoken about in our conversation. You did not speak about Bach on the St.
Mm.
Matthew Passion, sung by Walter Berry. Why Walter Berry?
Well, I think it's one of the most round and sophisticated voices ever around. He was one of the, I think, most subtle performers we had. Of course, if you listen to it now in the year of 2025, a lot has changed, uh, especially how we interpret Baroque music. I think this is a Herbert von Karajan recording I chose from the catalog.
Yeah,
We don't play the tempi to us. They seem very slow, and the
right.
instrumentation is very thick. And it's like that's not how we do it again, how we do it nowadays. But the singing is just glorious, and he really understands what he's doing. His range is astonishing. He was a bass baritone, but he could also sing a wonderful ox. There's a really
Marilyn Austin Rosenkavalier. Yeah,
yes, Baronox of Lerchenau, and he has a rock solid low C.
yeah,
You can
he
hear
does.
it. He absolutely does, and I think he's the most touching barak we ever had in the history of
Well, I was
humankind.
about to say to you that I saw him
Yeah,
and Crystal Ludwig as the Dyer's
yeah.
wife in
Wow.
Frauenstadt in Germany a long time ago when you were
Mm,
not born. And I was very, very young. I was very young. I did not understand that opera at all. By the way,
yeah.
Frauenstadt, Frauschch.
Yes.
At the
Bosch.
Met, I don't know about in Europe, but we call it Frosch here. And Frosch mean,
We also call it thrush. It's the
meaning
frog.
frog auf Deutsch. Enough said. Your favorite opera is Parsifal. We discussed that. Filippo Secondo from Don Carlo with Cesare Siepi singing. The symphonic Metamorphosis by Paul Hindemith. Why that? Uh,
I think it's one of the first things I heard in concert back in the day. There was in these concerts we did from the orchestra did there, and it was a huge discovery for me. I'm still a huge fan of Paul Hindemith. I think he's critically underappreciated
mhm.
on the concert stage and also as well on the opera stage. He's kind of in between. He's not one of the modernists of the time. He's also not a traditional pick. So he kind of, he falls in between categories, and that's why he's not done often enough. If you ask me, Matis the Mala is a masterpiece, as is Cardiac and all these pieces, and they should be done. And it's just a very, very, very special thing. I played it on the tuba back in the day, and it just stayed with me ever since. The whole repertoire, the symphonic repertoire of Mahler, Bruckner,
Yeah.
and all these things. I also did.
So, listener, if you go to Frankfurt on a Sunday, but only on a Sunday, you can have the delicious Grona salsa, the green sauce that I love in Frankfurt. It's one of the great condiments of the world. And then go over to Paul Hindemith's house, which is only
Yeah.
open on Sundays. It's one of the most unusual composer houses I know in the world and very much worth a visit. You spoke of loving de Rosenkavalier, Wotan's Abschied Farewell, sung by George London in
Mm,
Die Walküre, and Mahler, sung by Brigitte Fassbinder, Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen, which is one of my favorite songs.
mm,
And I thought of it because you were talking about walking in the Alps
mm.
alone with the world put behind you. And
That's
that,
pretty
to
much it.
me, in the best sense, is an expression of that. I love that song. I'm not the only one who loves that song. Why do you love that song?
I think it's a huge adieu to the whole world of saying coming back to yourself. Many people see it as a metaphor for dying. I think it's a testament to the human spirit and what you can express. It's just something that resonates with me. Maybe it's because he composed this in a very Austrian way, I guess. It's so
Yes.
full of lyricism, it's full of folk music, it's so connected. Also, when I hear his symphonies, when you get the scherzo and
Mhm.
also with Bruckner as well, all these things, they are just so ingrained into our. I think you can learn to appreciate another culture and kind of become like bilingual culturally if you make an effort. But there's just something so connected to your language, your culture, your family you grew up with. Also, the Rosenkavalier, it's the most Austrian thing ever composed. And you can
I
pretty
think
much
Johann Strauss Jr. would disagree, but because
that's
we
true. I
call
mean,
Strauss was a German.
but that no, I know Strauss was a German, of course.
Yeah.
He was a Bavarian who was like half Austrian. They all are. Um, I can say this as a Tyrolean. I feel more connected to the Bavarians than I feel to the Viennese. So and it's and the most Austrian thing about it that it's just all fake. It doesn't make any sense. Um, they made it all up. Hugo von Hofmannsthal, no one ever gave a silver rose to anybody to be like the Cavalier de la Rose. It's all made up. It's all fake, and that's the Austrian thing about it because it's so much frosting on the cake. Some people find it incredibly kitsch. I think it's the most amazing opera. It brings me to tears every time, at the end of the first act when the Marschallin is reflecting on life, and it just connects to people. It's sweet. It's maybe too much of everything. It's also very rude when you have Baron Ox. Um, and it has like everything you need in life is in this one opera. It teaches you about life in general.
I have one last question for you, and it's been wonderful to have you as a guest, by the way, and I really
Thank
mean that.
you.
Um, if General Director Christina Skeppelman came to you and said, Florian, we have a problem. Our base canceled. We need someone to sing Arkell. We need someone to sing Zarastro. Please help us. What would you do?
I think this would pretty much be ultima ratio to actually get me on stage again. I haven't, because when I stopped singing, I really did. So I don't sing in any capacity anymore. And of course, as everybody knows, it's if you were very serious about singing, you train your voice every day, and it's just not there anymore. I never had. I left the stage about, let's say, 5 years ago, more or less. And I have never since then appeared publicly on stage. And I also like to separate these things. So I'm not gonna cast myself in any capacity, but we do sometimes joke about it because she's like, if I was a singer, I would sing Eboli on stage because that's like her favorite character. And I said, well, if you let me do at least Frate in this one, we're gonna make it happen. Let's do Don Carlo. And have a very very special rendition of Carlo maybe here in Brussels.
Florian Köfler, it's been really wonderful to have you. I ask people who are following this to go to Brussels and go to the Monnaie, go
Please
to
do.
your opera company, wherever your opera company is, and support these companies. They do important things. It's not easy, as you've made clear, to make an opera get on the stage and to bring an audience in. And we do it because we love it in whatever form. And so I thank you very much.
Thank you very much.